Hello and welcome to Mime Radio. I'm Karen Hoyer.
And I'm James Donlin. And I'd like to introduce to you the man behind the curtain, the man that pulls the levers, the man that pushes the buttons, the man that can shut us off at any time, our production manager, Michael Diaz.
Yay, Michael.
And we're coming from different spots. I'm in California, Karen's in Chicago, and Mike is in Ohio. And we have a beautiful guest today, an amazing performer, teacher, a name that many people recognize as an iconic figure in experimental theater in the United States and in other parts of the world. Let me tell you about Joan Schirle. Joan Schirle is the founding artistic director of Del Arte International. She is an actor, playwright, director, deviser, teacher, and is a celebrated leader in the field of experimental theater. Her solo show, Second Skin, has been seen in many U.S. cities and international festivals. She has authored and co-authored many original works for Del Arte and has a great interest in international exchange, working with artists around the world. Joan designed the curriculum for Del Arte's accredited MFA in ensemble-based physical theater and is one of the school's master teachers of movement, mask performance, commedia dell'arte, voice, and physical acting. She has devoted her research to the work of the actor as mover, creator. Her essays have appeared in many publications, and she has taught in several MFA programs as well as for artists of Cirque du Soleil. So let us welcome, with great excitement, Joan Schirle.
Hello.
Hello.
Ta-da.
Hello. Welcome. We're so glad that you could make it. And
Thank you so much.
So you're living in Humboldt County, and which I'm very acquainted with. That's where Del Arte School of Physical Theater is. And we used to call that region of California, which is amazingly beautiful, the incredible redwood forest, we called it behind the redwood curtain. So this is an environment that you've been involved in for many years, and we're excited to get some of this knowledge from you.
You know, in the early years when we were touring and had made quite a few headlines touring California and the country, they started calling us Humboldt's second most famous export.
And the first was,
of course.
That's right. Is it still the number one?
Well, we're certainly not the second most famous anymore because the touring market dried up. But I would say that marijuana is still the number one export of Humboldt County, legal as it is now. And because it replaced timber as the primary economic driver of our area. And that's pretty much gone too.
Yeah, as well as fishing. Fishing is probably not as strong as it used to be.
Nope.
Well, I didn't know what James was talking about when he was talking about the red curtain. I was thinking
redwood curtain.
I know, but I was thinking red curtains that you open up.
That would be fabulous, wouldn't it?
So here's my first question for you, because I'm always curious on how performers. Oh yes, very nice, Joan.
Your red curtain.
There's your red curtains. I'm always curious about how actors prepare. What do they think about what does a performer think about right before they step on stage? And you could think about this in terms of yourself as a performer or also as a teacher. Like, what do you do to get into the right place before you take that step on stage?
I think there's lots of different things. I mean, some people need, and this would be me, I prefer to have a kind of quiet dressing room. You know, our dressing rooms at Del Arte, for example, and most all the dressing rooms I'd ever be in, because I wasn't having my own private star Broadway dressing room by the age of 45. So I pretty much always am sharing a dressing room. And some people are blah, 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 this, that, talking about the day. Whereas my personal preference is to try to, especially as I'm putting on my makeup, kind of absorbing my character and just trying to take a calming of myself before starting. And then after the calming, comes the sort of internal rev up.
Mhm.
I believe that a certain kind of nervousness is valuable before you go on stage, the kind like probably they say maybe racehorses feel just before starting the race. But it's also about relaxation. So that dynamic is really, really important. I think that's for me. Some people just blather on and on in the dressing room and then step on stage and there they are.
So you're not cranky or argumentative or defiant. You're just in a very soft kind of like a warm bath.
Ew, no. I'm like a little bonfire, you know, that's slowly putting the things on and building to a conflagration so
Uh-huh.
that when I step on stage, it's like, what happened?
Yeah. And who is that audience to you? Like, how do you perceive the people out there that are going to witness what you're doing? Do you have?
That depends again. Um, I don't know if you remember who Sandra Archer is. She's one of the founders of the San Francisco Mime Troupe, an extraordinary woman, extraordinary actor, extraordinary leader. But she was fond of saying, I seduce the audience.
Mm.
Now, I would say that there are certain characters about whom I feel that way, but there are other characters about whom I want the audience to get into my breath space. And so it's less about seduction than just engagement.
Mm-hmm.
And I've done quite a bit of vocal training with a wonderful teacher named Patsy Rodenberg, who talks about circles of energy. And briefly, a first circle energy is, okay, I'm going into it now. I'm now in first circle energy, and it's like, okay, I just withdrew. And third circle energy is, I got a lot to tell you, and do we have time? Because it's all about me. And second circle energy is much more about being present, fully energized, aware of your space, aware of the people. And Carlo Mazzoni Clementi, who founded Dell'Arte and is a master, one of them mine, an imperfect master, but a master, always talked about the triangle, that it's you, your partner, or the space if there's not a human partner there, and the audience. And it's that triangle. It's a very commedia dell'arte concept about. Then, of course, there's days when the audience is just shitty. Really? I don't know if I can say that in your program, but or you look, you know, you go backstage at the scene break and you say to your partner, "There's an oil painting out there," and you know, Patsy would say, "You never try to go into third circle in order to get them to be with you. That you be with yourself, present." And doing your job, and you don't withdraw from them, but you don't try to aggressively get them back. I don't know if that's your all experiences.
No, that makes total sense. Do you ever peek at the audience before you step on stage?
Yes, I do.
So do I. I like to do that.
Yeah. Oh, there's so and so, and there's who's that?
Yeah.
Oh, there are kids in the front row. Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
In your creative process, when you're creating work and the types of performance that do you never have that fourth wall of classical theater? It's always the connection of the mime and the clown.
No, I would say that there are certain pieces I've done that are fourth wall. Like I just did a couple of years ago, I played a character named Marjorie Prime in a very traditional scripted play, fourth wall. So I'm never reaching to make eye contact with the audience, but I'm very aware of them. I'm very aware if they're quiet, if they're breathing with me, if I'm sitting in the back of a house sometimes, especially when my students do work, I'll watch and see at what point the audience all start to shift in their chairs. And at that point you say, okay, there's something wrong with this scene or this whatever, because the audience is falling out of second circle, to use Patsy's analogy, and they're getting restless. So how do we avoid that? But
Did you ever, did silence ever throw you when you were a young performer? The audience sitting, like, it took me a while to realize that they could be just concentrating very deeply. Just because they're dead quiet doesn't mean they're not enjoying what you're doing. But did that ever, did you have to make that journey to try to accept the fact that they're not giving you much back, and maybe that's okay? Because it threw me for a while.
Well, it certainly throws me if you're doing comedy and nobody laughs. That is for sure. And that's throwing. And that sometimes, because in our early years, we did a great deal of touring, we were able to actually figure out how to work a show, how to rework a show, so that if your experience of, doing 10 performances in 10 towns and they kept not laughing at a certain line, you'd rewrite that and try to make that happen. But silence, I suppose it's a performer ego that, oh, I love it. I can fill this silence, whether it's with movement or with words, but I can enter into that silence and engage there. Yeah. I'm very much about the breadth of the audience. And I feel that if you can, because some of the work that I do is not, it's very lyrical, low key, meaning I want the audience to really come into it, and I want to change their breathing. So silence in that case is a positive indicator that that's working.
How did you get started in this crazy life of a
just
performer?
A little girl.
Yeah.
Were you a performer as a child? Did you like performing? Is that a part of your personality?
I'll learn something interesting looking at old photographs of myself. I'm really old. And we had paper dolls when I was a kid. And all the paper doll sets were of movie stars. Mm-hmm. And the movie stars when I was a child were people like Doris Day, Ava Gardner, Rhonda Fleming, Rita Hayworth. And okay, now I have to get up to show you this.
This is the kind of where you kind of had a little tab and you could put the different wardrobe.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But the poses, you would get the doll would come separately from the clothing and you cut them out. But the dolls always stood like this. Yeah. 3/4, which is the most flattering. And with their legs kind of crossed together, which made it easier, of course, to design dresses and put the tabs on. So I looked at these photos of myself with my family when I was a kid, and often I'd be standing like that. I get that. This kind of glamour girl thing. And then one day I realized it was the paper dolls. Yeah. And that I had picked up that way of being, because I would say I've always been a great imitator in terms of picking up a style or a voice or an accent. And I just obviously thought a lot of those ladies. And but I did not really get into performing until I was in college. I was in maybe a couple, I danced since the time I was a kid. My mother put us into ballet school and piano lessons.
Now, this was in San Jose area? Is this where you grew up? Yeah.
Yes.
There were probably orchards back then, more kind of
it was the blossom capital of the nation.
Absolutely,
at that time, before it became Silicon Valley.
Yeah.
So we had these lessons which were supposed to make us into young ladies who could find suitable husbands eventually. I didn't know that was my mom's plan at that time. But I was in ballet class since I was 8. I really wanted to take tap, desperately wanted to take tap, but my mother wouldn't let us because tap was something only cheap girls did. That and baton twirling, which I also really wanted to do. So ballet, piano. And then I nearly flunked out of my first year of college at University of California, Berkeley, because I'd led a very sheltered life. And suddenly I was thrown into the free speech movement and the beginning of hippiness. And I I failed to go to my botany class at 8 a.m. and failed the test and so on. So I ended up going to the University of Santa Clara, which is in my hometown, San Jose. And I had makeup classes in the summer. So I had a speech class. And the professor kind of took a shine to me and he said, "Hey, we're doing a production this summer. Why don't you come? We need crew people. Come and help us." So I crewed for a production of The Importance of Being Earnest and discovered that theater people are a lot of fun because my family life was all pretty much, polite and not a lot of speaking at the table. And you certainly don't talk about your feelings. I loved friends who'd say, "My parents are throwing plates at each other." I said, "God, I wish my parents would throw plates at each other." But that kind of hooked me on theater. And then as I entered my sophomore year after that, I just went out I was in every production that I could be in. I was a theater rat, basically. And it was a great time.
Did the 60s, in my development, the 60s were incredibly important in terms of influences on me. Not so much, in terms of drugs and those kind of things, but just the social political fabric of that decade was so charged. There's never been a decade like it. People landed on the moon, assassinations, Vietnam War. You and I are about the same generation. So I'm wondering if that had any part in your in influencing you or guiding you to have an interest in theater.
I don't know that it guided me to have an interest in theater. I think things like growing up Catholic, which is very theatrical in its ritual, at least it was then, before the vernacular became sort of took over the old style stuff. I felt in some ways a bit out of all that. Ahead of me one year in class was Jorma Kaukonen, who became a member of the Jefferson Airplane. And I remember him coming into one of our sessions and saying, "Hey, you guys, we're going to be famous." And he meant Jefferson Airplane. And I observed this happening around me, but was so involved in theater at that point. I would say that certainly it took me longer. Here's what I'll say. I'm a later bloomer than most people of my generation, about 10 years behind. So it wasn't until I was in my late 20s that I, became part of the Back to the Land movement, the total hippie thing. They were going to sell all we have because the world is going to ruin. There's going to be a revolution, all of that.
Well, Berkeley is a lot different than Santa Clara. So it's interesting that you found theater at a university like Santa Clara. And, I had a Catholic background myself, and I was very confused by it. I would never stick my hand in the holy water, yuck, I'm not putting my hand in that. And, if you were kneeling in the pew, you'd sit halfway on the bench behind you, and the choir was some mysterious thing. So my dad was, Irish Catholic, and my mother was Congregationalist, the opposite. So I had to go to church twice.
Yeah.
And then I decided when I was 13 that I just wasn't going to go to church anymore. I was going to watch the LA Rams play football on Sundays. But I can understand the ritual of Catholicism and the kind of the pageantry and the incense and the taking communion. It's so theatrical,
right. And my sisters and I were church organists for the Catholic Church in our town. And then I went to a Catholic high school with nuns, which has a whole other different level of ritual. And then, except for that year at Berkeley, then I went to this Jesuit university, which has an intellectual ritualization about
Interesting.
it. So,
wow. Talk to us a little bit about what you did after getting immersed in theater in your college years. Where did you go after that? And how did you end up at Del Arte?
God, how much time you got?
We got time. We got, quite a bit of time here. Go
ahead. Tell us a story.
You might be the feature interview. We might make you the headliner of the whole shebang, and have different, excerpts.
Well, what does go to make up an artist, really? I mean, what is the the recipe, and mine included getting pregnant out of wedlock when I was in the year just out of university. I had stuck around an extra year. My teachers had started a Shakespeare Festival a few summers early. I was kind of grandfathered into that. So I got this great training in that as well. And they wanted me to choreograph the dances on the green. So I was doing that kind of thing. And then I got pregnant. And I didn't want my parents to know. So the last year that I was there at the Shakespeare Festival, we had a voice teacher named Carol Pendergrast, who was a Kristen Linklater graduate. And it was Kristen's first years of doing that. And part of what they did as their training included the FM Alexander technique. And Carol had said to me, Joan, if you go to New York, you should study Alexander. Because I had decided that New York was the furthest from San Jose I could possibly get. And so I did. I took myself to New York when I was 5 months pregnant and gave up my daughter for adoption there.
Wow.
And that's when I started my mime studies, because one of my Santa Clara teachers had said, when you go to New York, you should study mime. It would be great for you. And
why would they say that? Why would your friends say that mime would be great for you?
Well, because I was an actor and a dancer and moved really, really well. And I think at that time, mime had those were the years that Lecoq and DeCreux had been in New York. Tony Montanaro still had his studio there. But I went, first of all, to Paul Curtis's school, to the American Mime. And he was my first mime teacher. And then after I had my child, I started going to Tony's classes at the Berghoff studio. Yeah. So, and I stayed in New York another 3 years, and I got a certificate in teaching FM Alexander technique, which has served me really well, both in terms of my ability to keep body and soul together, and in terms of being able to integrate that into everything that I teach. So, and there's minor details in there, this relationship, that relationship, and this and that. But essentially, I left New York 4 years later and returned to California as a certified Alexander teacher. I had at that point become introduced to things like Laban work, modern dance. I always thought, and I've written about this in articles, that there was such a thing as stage movement, and there wasn't. It was that time, it was, fans and gloves, and may I pass that to you that way, and sit with your legs together.
Period and style, they used to call it.
Period and style. And that's about all there was, except fencing and dancing.
Yeah.
And I was shocked when sometime in the 90s, I think I taught at Yale, and they still only had modern dance and one other thing as movement training. That has since changed. But
well, I remember, when I was at Humboldt, I graduated in 1970, and right after that, they let me teach mime classes at age 22 or 3 to the students. And I was perplexed, like, why? Because it's true. Nobody knew anything about movement. Nobody knew. So you could make your own pathway. And, that's something we can talk about, because there's been a kind of a hole, I think, in movement training. It's really misunderstood by the greater theater community, how important it is. But I always say that the teachers that in a drama program, the teachers that the students remember are the voice teacher and the movement teacher or performance teacher. That's the chrysalis, the core, the guts of the experience of the acting craft. And so it's interesting. Your journey is very close to it. I was going to ask you, so I know something about these teachers that you're mentioning. So would you say that mime is kind of a core foundation of who you are? Or I'm sure that's changed over the years, but did that kind of trigger you to start this journey with a more physical way of acting or performing? Is it like what? Because I know the styles like Tony Montanaro and Paul Curtis was kind of unto himself, but Montanaro and people like that were very classic in some ways. And just what do you think about that?
Well, Paul and Tony were very different kinds of teachers. Paul's teaching was very much based on being focused on him. And
on him, the teacher?
An exercise where we had to stand against the wall, facing the wall, and then we would slowly turn, and we had to lock eyes with Paul. Of course, they were 10, but all of us had to focus on him. Yeah. And then we had to very slowly draw ourselves across the room, and he would give different directions as we did that, but it was always, look here, look here. And
was that the one where he would say, out? In, wasn't that a part of? I remember I watched the class. Paul Curtis would say "out," and people would kind of relax, and he'd go in, and then there'd be this intense thing, And that, I remember they were confronting the watcher, like I was observing, and they were like right in on me, not Paul Curtis, but they were looking, and he'd say "out," and they'd kind of relax, in, and they'd come back, And,
and he taught, double pins, pin, and. Very Decruvian in that way.
Yeah.
We also had to sign into class into a big book. What was our condition that day, and what's the condition of the space? So these were all new to me. I'd had a fairly traditional acting background, and then dance, and those did not meet in those days. And so that was like, okay, this is weird, but I'm doing it.
How was Tony's class? How were they different for you?
Tony, totally different.
Yeah.
Very self-effacing in terms of there was not a great deal of ego in his teaching. Mm-hmm. It was much more spiritual, in the sense that he would sometimes, the most difficult thing, of course, was, all right, be a rock hurtling through space. So, okay. And then you try all kinds of things. And of course, they're all wrong. And you ultimately, I think, come to the idea that it's about simply being as full as possible in the silence and the presence of yourself, without trying to make something happen. And that was also the way Carlo taught and Ronlin taught. And pretty much most of the teachers, and now it's, I hear it a lot more. It's more about being than doing. It's really about a combination, but being is really critical. So Tony was a really sweet man, and I only worked with him because I was still pregnant. And then he left not too long after that, but he and Carlo worked together.
Yeah. So now you have this intense mime experience. So is this kind of the bedrock, or did this, like I said earlier, a few minutes ago, like did this trigger you into, do you still carry some of these lessons with you? Or I guess a good question would be, you don't call yourself, you're not a mime. You don't say you're Joan Schirle the mime or Joan Schirle the clown. Like what do you call yourself in relation to maybe this experience that you had, these 4 years that were really intense, and how did that form you?
Unfortunately, labels are crappy, because unless you call yourself something, people don't know what you are.
Especially in the United States, yeah.
Yes. In one of the articles I wrote, there's not a lot of respect for people who are actor / director / deviser / and there's few people who have broken through that, Susan Stroman being one of them, and who can dance, choreograph, direct, probably write too. I don't know if I think she has written. So just as ensembles were not considered something, collaborative playwriting, writing plays by committee, and that was like frowned upon. For years, we struggled with the fact that we were a collaborative ensemble creating original scripts together. That's sort of now different because everyone's hip to devising. And, But I'm going
No,
to
it's
go
like
back to
even
your question, James.
Shakespeare was a devised piece of work at one point. I don't even believe in the word devising. I mean, it's all created, right?
Yeah, it's making shit up is what we used to say.
Yeah, and it's such a funny thing because I remember coming across this word devising that I hadn't heard of, and I was like, well, yeah, we've been doing that forever. That is not new.
Yeah. But it's gone mainstream.
What's that?
I said it's gone mainstream. But let me just say, James, to really answer your question. Do I consider myself? Yes, my foundation is in, regrettably, in dance, because Carla used to say to me, I always watch your feet, but you're a dancer, not a mime. And oh, that was such a slam. He didn't mean it like that. But and it had to do with having for years in dance been taught to appear to defy gravity, as opposed to the mime idea of grounding yourself fully in the earth and working out of that. I don't care what he said. I still feel.
But also, the mime is a actor creator, so I think that part of it maybe is what you've carried forward. That to be a mime or a clown, you have to. Well, especially mime, you create your own work, and maybe that's what you've taken with you to this point now. You know.
Well, also the ability to understand that one can do that and that and that, very simply put, without all of this happening at the same time.
Yeah, that's great. Great example.
So, that was really foundational to all of the rest of my movement training. And I had to do a lot of undoing work to counter the ballet training that I had, both because I had locked up my hip joints as well as, create this illusion.
And your hands were probably in some kind of form, right? Some dance form that,
yes.
I always find when I teach, you can tell who the dancers are just because their hands, they don't do stuff like this, it's they're always sort of different,
And my feet always wanted to go into third position,
Yeah.
And it's so interesting because talking to Karen Montanero, who has a very strong ballet background, it's the same thing. She says like this difference between being airy and being grounded and finding that and feeling so much more at home in this new place. It's very interesting.
Yeah.
Tell us the next part of the story though. How did you get to Del Arte and how did you start making all these wonderful plays and things?
Okay, well, to extract myself from New York after getting my Alexander certificate, and I put myself through school working as a bartender, and I could see that was leading toward a not such a good thing. I had decided at this point that I did not have the requisite drive to take on an acting career in New York. That's what I said I was going for. I said I was going to go to New York. I'm going to audition for show. And I realized it was way more intense than I ever thought. And I wasn't ready for that. It took another bunch of years for me to garner the drive to do that. But I get ahead of myself. So I left New York. I went to Europe for a while. I bought a motorcycle. I rode around Europe. I went to Amsterdam.
Wow.
Did these things. Yes, I have a funny story about learning to drive.
What year would that have been? What years were you riding the motorcycle in Europe?
That would have been 1969, 70.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
And I did that because two friends came back from Europe and said, yeah, we've gone all over on a motorcycle. We had a great time. So I asked my boyfriend at the time, who had a big motorbike, I said, will you teach me? Oh, no, you'll kill yourself. And at the time, I didn't say, that is the height of sexism if I have ever heard it. But it was. So we broke up and I said, okay, I'm going to learn myself. So I saw an ad in the Village Voice saying motorcycle lessons, $60 for 8 lessons. So I signed up for this and discovered that what they do is you sit on a motorbike in a garage and you go in first gear and you do circles and figure eights for most the whole time. And I never had any road experience. Wow. However, when I finally did go to England and bought a bike, I was so happy for that because it's all about the balance when you're going slow. Going fast is easy, but going through London in traffic, the ability to take your time, etc. Anyway, that was a lot of fun. But I came back to California actually because of a pot bust that had happened when I was in New York. Very checkered picture.
Wow, you do have a checkered past, yeah.
Anyway, I get back to California.
Wait, this is after riding the motorcycle in Europe?
Yes, I crashed.
Did you do
in
theater?
Amsterdam.
Did you do theater or physical theater or anything in Europe, or just ride the motorcycle?
I went to visit people. I went to visit an Alexander teacher I had heard about in a newspaper article, who was working with these older athletes, and it said so and so helps these older athletes win medals. So I called her and went up to see her, and in her library, waiting for her to meet me, I saw these books with titles like Meetings with Remarkable Men and Art of Zen. And I had never heard of these before. And I should backtrack slightly. When I left New York with an Alexander Technique certification, I was kind of not really enthusiastic about doing that work. It seemed like only wealthy people could afford to come and take a course of private lessons. And the people I really wanted to work with, who were actors and singers and so on, didn't have the money. And I thought, I don't know that I want to do this. And but I, at that time, didn't realize the depth of that work until I started reading in spiritual studies, in fourth way stuff, and realized that all that is about being present, and that the Alexander Technique teaches you to be present and to have choices about how you move, how you say, how everything. And I realized, oh, I have something much more valuable than I actually thought. So that, and then I met this mad poet in Amsterdam named Max Schwartz, who has since died, but wrote wonderful stuff, and he had a Volkswagen bus. Written on the front of it, it said, "California, peace, brother, peace." And he was on his way to Morocco, and I desperately wanted to go with him. But the night before, practically the night I was going to get social with him, we smoked some hash, and I got horribly ill. And that wrecked it, of course, because I was out of it, and he left the next day. Anyway, that was one of those ships that passed stories.
So this triggered you to go to California, and you back to California.
Well, I went back to California basically because I couldn't stay in Europe forever, and we had this little pot bust that happened in Westchester County was bringing us, asking us to come to court. You know, I was in a car with some people going to Woodstock, not the festival, but just there, and we got pulled over and spent a night in the Westchester County Jail. Anyway, I get back to California.
I'm using the word trigger. I've said this triggered you, this triggered that. I've used that word 3 times, and it seems that you respond to the environment very quickly, and you make decisions. You're probably a great improviser because you're going with the circumstances, it seems, up to this point in your story of evolution. So you're heading back to California by this point.
But improvisation, I just want to say something. I do feel that I've had a somewhat improvised life, and I believe in the improvised life, and have some friends at a company in Brazil called Lume. Don't know if you've ever heard of them. Wonderful ensemble of 7 who live together, not live together, but well, the 3 women in the group all had their children the same year so that they could keep their work going without, an interruption, etc. And they used to do a parade, a street parade they called Parada da Rua. And all of them would have instruments. They all played instruments. And the leader, Riccardo Puccetti, who's also a clown, said, my goal is to be able to improvise everything and never worry that I've made an error or something. And I love that thought that
that's a great thought.
In order to be free enough to improvise. It's not like improvisation is just
I call it comfort and free fall.
Great
if you can
idea.
find comfort in free fall, that's the goal right there.
And that's a freedom,
And that whole idea of being present in the moment, which is so important in performing, to be present in your life, to be present in the moment of your life. Like you say, having an improvised life, that's what it really means, being present.
Yes. So I'm improvising coming back to California and going to work for my alma mater. Um, they asked me if I would teach dance and Alexander to actors. I did that a bit, and then I got involved with another person. And the upshot of that is that I left the city. I had moved with him to San Francisco, and then we broke up. And I said, I'm taking everything, I'm selling everything I have, I'm putting everything in my Volkswagen van, I'm driving north. And I did. And uh, one thing led to another. I ended up living off the grid in southern Humboldt County, a town you might have heard of, James, called Whale Gulch, way out west of Garberville,
Whoa,
the
I
west
haven't heard
coast.
of Whale Gulch. Is that, wow. No, I haven't heard of that one.
Garberville
It's
Redway.
on the Fort Bragg on that winding road that,
Well, it's north of Fort Bragg. If you
yeah,
take that winding lost road,
yeah,
you
right.
end up out at the coast where there's only
Whale
dirt.
Gulch.
Yeah.
Wow.
So I lived there off the grid for 3 years.
Wow.
And during that time, I would say, I wouldn't have talked about it this way then, but now I talk about it in the way that a bulb goes underground and draws nourishment all that time in order to,
Yeah.
that's what I was doing, because about 2.5 years after I was there, I was broke. I was living on food stamps. I was making baskets. I was making friends with some very wonderful Native people, Yurok. I wanted to learn how to survive. And I was on my way to trying to get further and further off the grid when I heard about this festival in Eureka called the Grand Comedy Festival at Kuala Walu,
That's right.
which Carlo and Jane, his wife, had started.
Yeah.
And one of my college boyfriends was in it, and he had said, "Hey, Joan, they pay actors." So I thought, So I went and auditioned for them for their summer festival. And I was too late to get a paid position, but on my resume, they saw that I taught Alexander technique and had taught acting. And they said, We're starting a school. We're starting a school this fall. Are you interested in joining the faculty? So I thought, well, I could do this part time and still keep my home off the grid.
Yeah, Humboldt County is famous for off the grid experiences.
Vital to my formation.
Was that the first season of Kuala Walu, or do you know which season that was?
No, I came upon them in like season 3.
Yeah. My partner, Bob Francisconi, was in the first season. He's a guy from Eureka that I worked with.
I know Bob. Yes, and Carlos.
Oh, you know Bob. You know Bob Francisconi.
Of him and of you, of course.
Yeah.
So they didn't open the school. That they had opened the school. They bought the building in Blue Lake in 1974. In January of 1975, I'm sorry, that's my phone vibrating. Let me throw it over there. They were going to. They started in January of 1975 and ran the school till June. That's when I visited it. And then they said, we're starting in the fall. But in fact, they did not. They didn't start again until January of 1976. And I was the faculty along with Avner, the eccentric Avner Eisenberg, and Jane, Carlo. And there was an Aikido teacher. And we were the faculty.
Wow.
And
I remember a show that Avner did at College of the Redwoods. It was the first, he had just come back from Lecoq.
yes.
And he was exploring. He had everything in the kitchen sink in that show. And some of the stuff he still does. But I just remember watching him at that theater at College of the Redwoods going, wow, he's got everything in there. He was just like a kid in his like garage, you know, it was like
bats and brooms and matches.
Exactly. Yeah, he was really
eating came later, but
yeah. And I was always impressed because he's a big guy, 6'1" or 2", and he was doing a backflip, you know, and that's hard for a person over 6 foot to do saltos, you know. So yeah.
So I will say that it was my first exposure to the work of Jacques Lecoq. That was the big revelation of those years.
Yeah.
Because Avner was Lecoq, Carlo was Lecoq, but Lecoq, Marceau, Barreau, and his own thing. But I had never thought that you could teach acting by observing nature, because that isn't how I was taught. I wasn't taught about what the wind does that you don't see. Or I was trying to be a rock hurtling through space, but it didn't take very well. Pardon me, at that time.
So this is interesting because I started in theater in Humboldt County, and that's all we had was nature. We were behind the redwood curtain, and so there's what you're saying is absolutely true. I mean, by accident, I learned by nature, also where I grew up, down here in California. But that's a very profound statement right there.
Yeah, nature is the teacher, and that drama
exactly.
is the tension of natural forces, the waves, whatever it is that you want to look at being the natural forces. That tension is drama. So to encounter that at this point in my life, I felt late coming to the party, but happy to be there. And so for maybe the first 3 years, I just sponged. I would sit in every one of Carlos' classes and write what he said, what he did, because it wasn't just what he did, it was the way he expressed himself was, I think, somewhat unique and baffling to a lot of people.
He was walking commedia. I live commedia. I live commedia. I am commedia.
I am mad, not mad.
Yeah.
It's a wonderful experience to be hired to be a teacher, but you're actually being a student also because of the people that you are working with, which is a privilege.
I'm quite grateful.
How has Del Arte changed over the years since those early...
Such a question.
Yeah. I mean, in a short sentence, like
it has evolved and grown and changed.
Yeah.
Well, Carlo's idea was very much Carlo and Jane's idea. I do not want to ever leave out the importance of her to this. He gets most of the credit, and she will always say it was Carlo's vision, but she made it happen.
She still lives in Humboldt County, right? She's
81 and just cracking along still.
Yeah.
So what was your question?
Oh, just how Del Arte's changed from these early years when you were involved and to the, just to now, like what's happened,
Well, you have run a school. Karen, I don't know if you've run a school. Were you involved in the celebration school? No,
I haven't run a school. I've just taught a lot. So,
okay. Yeah. Well, to hold a school together is a massive undertaking, as it is to hold together a theater company. If you're trying to do those both at the same time, it's an awful lot of work. So that's where I feel those 3 years of Nurturance in the Woods allowed me to spend the next 7 years of my life pushing this juggernaut uphill, because the year 1976, when I started at Del Arte, that summer, the last summer festival at Kuala Jane left. She quit. She divorced Carlo and said, I've had it. And the entire board quit and everybody quit. And there was nothing. And by that time, Abner had left and been replaced by another Lecoq grad named Jonathan Paul Cook, who had helped found the Footsbarn Company, an amazing company in England. And he and I had become lovers at that point. And so all that was left was the building with its mortgage, and then Carlo and John Paul and myself, and no money. One grant from the NEA that was supposed to tour a production that was supposed to have already been made, but hadn't been. And this was like, the turning point. All these other things were leading to this turning point. And John Paul and I said, well, let's stay on under the condition that we be allowed to have the power to do things. So Carlo agreed, and the three of us, he became the artistic director, John Paul became the school director, I became the managing director, even though I'd never directed anything. And we set about taking in, I think there were 7 students signed up for that fall. And we worked for nothing until we could get some money coming in from their tuition. And Carlo had decided this grant was for a play that was supposed to contrast the Native American animal spirit figures with commedia characters.
Yeah, I remember that project. Yeah.
It was called The Loon's Page.
Yeah, that's right.
And it ended up being a much more political play than Carlo ever wanted it to be, partly because, and now this is where you get into how did Dell'Arte evolve? Well, so we ended up with this company. There's a lot to tell about how to get the grants to get a company. You probably heard of CETA, the Comprehensive Employment and Training Act in the Carter administration, which got a lot of artists jobs. It was amazing. And that's what allowed us to hire a couple more actors, get this production of The Loon's Rage done, written by a former member of the San Francisco Mime Troupe. And that was our first tour. And we were fortunate enough to get a good review in the LA Times, which I was able to leverage into an Arts Council grant. This is so boring. Are you sure you?
Well, was there a close relationship to the San Francisco Mime Troupe in terms of the philosophy and the process of working?
Carlo knew them, and they knew Carlo. And Ronnie Davis, when he founded the troupe, had met Carlo, and they had long conversations about commedia. I would say the Mime Troupe, we were like sister companies, except the Mime Troupe thought of itself as political theater, and we thought of ourselves as theater dealing with issues.
Yeah. But see, Dell'Arte, for a long time was the place, the kind of established place to study physical theater. Mm-hmm. And now you have the MFA, which is quite an accomplishment. Having taught a lot of MFA programs myself, that's quite an accomplishment. And it's wonderful that this organization, came to that. I'm just wondering how the times today, like you said, there's nobody there this year, or there's only 5 people there this year. Well,
that's because of the pandemic.
But it sounds like Dell'Arte is very healthy. I mean, in most years, in terms of where it's come to.
Well, let me tell you where
I don't know the dirty laundry. I don't know. I've heard stories. There's little things, whispers in my ear, but
well, like most arts organizations now, we have had to examine our relationship to white supremacy culture and the fact that our pedagogy, our audiences are primarily white. Humboldt County is 84% white people. The next largest demographic is Native American people. So, however, always we have been international in terms of our students. For example, we have scholarshiped for the last 6 years, a student each year from Zimbabwe, and they have now started a sister school over there. We have had students from, 30 countries. However, in the same way that self-examination is being asked for by all people, all white people who work in the arts, it's being asked of us. And the younger leaders are responding to that with seriousness of intent and real changes. Mm-hmm. And I would say that our new mission value statement says that we are now centering the organization on social equity. And we have started to diversify our board of directors, which means sometimes the people don't live in Humboldt County anymore. Mm-hmm. And we are offering a series of online workshops this summer, some of which are being taught by transgendered people, by Latinx people, by people who are former students who have stepped much more into the whole idea of embodied social justice. So I would say, and the other thing, of course, is, as I told you pre-interview, I'm no longer part of the management of Dell'Arte. And Michael is about to step totally out of that position. Neither of us are on a board anymore. And there are 3 female leaders now, and they are guiding the organization into, of course, an uncertain future, because the performing arts took it in the shorts bigger than any other segment of the population during the pandemic. Our MFA program is on hold. We still, next year, we're taking in a group of students for the 1-year program. and we're doing online workshops. We're producing a mini summer festival instead of the month-long Mad River Festival that we do. And I'm presenting the opera I wrote 2 years ago, which was supposed to have been presented last summer and had to be postponed. So things are going forward, but it is with a tremendous amount of introspection, self-examination, auditing our pedagogy for where it lines up with white supremacist ideas. You know, a lot of things that I always thought were the result of patriarchy, classism, ageism, are now looked at as the result of systemic racism. So I'm adjusting my own point of view.
Mhm.
And talk about your point of view now. Like we've talked about Delarte for last few minutes. So you were tied to that, artistically and probably socially for, decades. Now, at this point in your life, being at, in the entering new doorways, is this division from Delarte natural for you? Is this something that you find that you, Joan Schirle, need? Now you have destiny and places to go that like what? Where are you now? In terms of
pulling out my guts. No,
yes, but how do you define who you are and what is your art form? How do you make that definition?
Well, for the last 5 years, I would say I've been slowly trying to remove myself from management level Delarte stuff in order to more fully explore the things I, as an artist, wanted to do. Mm-hmm. And they're not always the kind of things that Delarte is known for. I mean, to do a chamber opera about a painter, a gay painter named Morris Graves, is not exactly something probably Delarte would have taken on. Although, as it's turned out, one of my younger colleagues is doing a piece about a Wiot painter named Rick Bartow, who's an extraordinary painter. So it's almost, I don't know if it's coincidence or not, that we're doing two projects about people in the visual arts. So, and then several years ago, I did a piece based on a Holocaust memoir that involved a friendship between 3 women. So I would say that my own projects have been more feminine oriented toward women's stories, and toward a more experimental form. I can't say exactly what that is.
Even more experimental than what the blurbs say on the website.
Is the work that you're creating now, is it solo work or is it ensemble? Are you writing and directing? Are you performing? What?
Well, this is, of course, an unusual year. None of us are doing probably what we would have done. In March, I did 3 for 3 different universities, some consulting teaching they were doing a Commedia Kyogen in Hawaii and observing design students work someplace else. So that was good. Good for me because I like teaching. The mask piece I sent you the link to is the last thing I actually created on my feet, aside from an hour-and-a-half clown improv online with Mookie Cornish, who you may know as a clown. She was with Cirque for quite a while. She's Canadian. And in our characters, we just babbled on about stuff. That's on YouTube, though I don't necessarily recommend it.
Well, that's the danger of video, isn't it? In today's world, if you're not proud of it, the world stamps you, and then you have to go back to ground zero, to build your reputation. Oh, I hear some music.
Yes.
It's that time.
Yes. The music
it's time for a gift.
Yes.
That's right. Joan, you may have received a gift from the Mime Museum. Oh, excellent. We would love for you to open it at this time.
Okay. Here it is.
Yeah.
It says, do not open until on the air with the Mime Radio Podcast. Cut here to open. I don't have a scissors.
Just rip it open.
Okay. I
It's
don't want to
probably
ruin
packed
the...
very carefully inside, you know, because it is valuable. So you won't hurt it. Oh. Please give us a narrative as you're opening it so that our listeners can.
The gold in here. There's a note. Oh no, it's tissue paper with dragonflies on it. That's very nice. I'll keep that. I'm something of a pack rat. Oh, isn't this beautiful? It's a wee bag.
Yeah.
It is a wee bag. I'm going to open it. I hear birds.
I hear birds too.
Isn't there any kind of tag or anything?
Yes, the tag says the Mime Museum. Michael Diaz, curator. He's the guy with the hip haircut. Souvenir B493X2. Description. Oh, really? Bag found in St. Mark's Square in Venice, circa 1598. Not that old. Following a show by Flaminio Scala's Commedia Troupe. It contains the 14 gold coins stolen by Arlecchino from the miser Pantalone.
And it's the Mime Museum, so
Yeah.
Mime coins?
You hear them? Fabulous.
yeah, they're. So you have to treasure those and keep them in a safe place because now you've got this. Yeah.
Puts them in her décolletage.
This is lovely. This will have and there's the beautiful card. B49 3 times 2. Well,
an exceptionally good piece from the Mime Museum.
And we've trusted you to have this, so you should feel honored because you now have the responsibility of keeping this in your company. So
cool. Yeah. Thank you so much. I'll just do this to it. See that? See it now.
Hey, Joan, do you have any disaster stories during your touring life, or anything that comes to mind that would be a very interesting experience?
I don't know how interesting it is to say that one has injured oneself a number of times in performance. Once I stepped backwards off the stage and did not injure myself.
You fell off the back of the stage, like on your back or something? It
was like I was walking backwards as the character and got to the edge of the stage and stepped off and landed on my foot still standing and was quite shocked that I had not hurt myself. But I have also broken a metatarsal wearing high heels in a show and walking backstage and not seeing something that was making during a cross.
Aye.
I've had my rib broken a couple of times in performances with Donald. It was not his fault. It was what we did.
How have you had to adapt over the years? Just in terms of we're getting older, right? And we're physical performers. How have you found the secrets to longevity as a performer?
Well, James, let's talk about getting older, shall we? It's not so difficult if you just keep your underpants on.
Yeah. Just have the toilet paper closer, a little closer.
Exactly, and only take 8 sheets.
Yeah, okay.
Why not?
Yeah.
I forget the question, honey.
The question was, have you, as older performers, or let's say experienced performers, always learn how to economize as they go through their lives? You take stuff away. So that's something I've been really aware of how I, so true, less is more now. So, and it also keeps you, there's a lot of mental energy you can use now that can compensate for the physical energy, because there's a balance that happens. And just in what your secrets are.
Oh, maybe also like taking away the high heels. No, don't need those anymore.
Yeah. Well, that was a lucky break of being taught by nuns in the years when they sent you to farm school to learn how to sit and stand in high heels. And I've always known that. And I feel bad for young women performers who haven't had the experience, or for guys doing drag roles where they don't realize you have to cross your feet like this when you're in high heels rather than walk like this. So I would say, what was the question? No.
Well, I'm just admiring your health at this moment. So I'm just wondering how you've been able to navigate
Alexander technique.
the Alexander technique.
Genes, although my mother always say, it's not genes, it's God. Well, whoever. But I wanted to ask something of Karen, because much of my touring life, let's say the first 25 years of Del Arte, it was mainly my working with Michael and Donald, and there were occasional, we would have a woman in that quartet, but they were usually guest artists. And it makes a big difference to learning how to hold one's own on stage. And I don't know what you're.
You mean as a female partner?
Yeah, especially in comic work.
Yeah. It's kind of interesting because when I went to form my own company, which is called Partners in Mime, I just looked around and there were many male mimes, but not very many females. So I made a choice to say my company is going to be women. And for a good portion of the history of Partners in Mime, it was a company of 2-3 women. And we played all the different parts, but it wasn't until later that we added men to the equation.
Why did you do that, Karen?
Really? What were you thinking?
Just stubbornness, I guess.
No, seriously. Why? What caused you to do that?
I was happenstance partly. It's like who's around to perform you, and I find other women, and they say, "Let's do this." And also coming from School of the Arts, there was this idea of making your own theater. There's this idea of don't be dependent on what's there, make it yourself. So that's kind of foolishly what I did, but I understand what you're saying, though, Joan, that sometimes men tend to dominate in an ensemble, and find that disturbing, James?
Excuse me.
Your language would indicate that he's miffed by that comment.
And also, like, particularly your specialty in commedia, I always was very frustrated with the idea in commedia that the women didn't have as strong character masks as the men did. And when we had a chance to do a commedia piece, I said, well, I don't want to be Flamino or whatever her name is. I don't want to be I'll be Arlecchino, okay?
Yeah.
Well, I think that, the argument that because women are beautiful, audiences want to see their faces. That's legit. Even Franca Rama said that in a workshop that I did with her. She's about as staunch a feminist as you can be. But I felt there is something about, that's a whole nother discussion. Let's just say I learned a lot about how to hold my own on stage, especially in comedy, performing with my male partners. And it's not like they deliberately sought to dominate, but their energy, etc., is really different. And the fact that my personal pieces that I've created, from Elizabeth's book, The Holocaust Story, that I created for 3 women. My story about basket making as a metaphor for balance in a woman's lives had 6 women in the cast. The piece, what did I just do? The Morris Graves piece, the opera, has a tenor playing Graves, but the chorus of birds and the other soloists are all women. Excuse me. And it's not that
the commedia piece that you wanted to show us, that you're using traditional commedia masks, but they're male, female, all different kinds of characters.
Yes. And like Isabella Andreni, the famous commedia diva, I feel as she did that one can play a whole spectrum. I enjoy playing men, and sometimes I do. And I just enjoy playing all kinds of people. I feel that I'm not what you call a personality actor. I'm someone who transforms, and that's kind of the basis of Del Arte training anyway. It's about the transformational actor. We're not a school to go to if you want the persona that you are to, be cast in pictures as you are. That's not us.
Yeah.
Um,
Talk to us about teaching. Like, how does that fit with your art and you? And what's the balance there? Or what's the emphasis, or how important it is to you? And what are you trying to do when you teach now? And and how have you changed as a teacher? There's so many things you could talk about, but
so many things.
I feel that my responsibility as a mime or a physical actor is to teach, also to give information that I've learned, pass it down to the younger generations. I always felt that teaching was equally important to me as performing, because they both informed each other,
I agree. I think that a performer who can teach is lucky because you learn a lot from your students. I feel that I'm not an original thinker in terms of teaching. I'm not someone like Lecoq or etc. I feel I'm a synthesizer, that what I have created is a synthesis of my trainings in everything from mime to Alexander to voice to movement to commedia, etc. And so I don't have what I would call a system. I'm a product of a lot of other people's systems.
Yeah, we all are, right? Yeah.
Yeah. And I always acknowledge the shoulders on which I stand, unlike a lot of my younger colleagues, not at Del Arte, just so on. And I feel that teaching, Ronan used an expression called pro voce, for your voice, for helping the student find their voice. And I think that is one of the things that I'm interested in. I'm interested in having them, and Carlo always said the self-discovered point is the only point, of having them engage in self-discovery through what they're doing. I'm also very much about the dance of technique and spirit. That
I was going to let me just stop there, because I just wrote here the dance. Like you have the dance in you, and I think I have a lot of experience with modern dance, and not only studying, but I infuse it in my work. Sometimes I was called a dancing mime or a mime dancer, but the dance, I think, is key, because most dancers teach very often, especially in modern dance. And there's something like the dance of the mime, the dance of the clown, which is being lost in today's younger generations, but this fixture of space and time and how it relates and how it, the cause and effect of energies, which is really what basic teaching is about, how one gesture, one thought triggers, there's that word you're triggering me, Joan. You're triggering this word in me a lot. But I think this idea of the dance which is in you, makes total sense to me, that you would be a teacher, because there of this other mysterious matrix that is involved with the concept of the dance, whatever form that takes for you.
Well, I think it takes a form, when I think sometimes of my relationship to performing, which I love doing, but at the same time, I'm not, I don't feel diminished when I can't, because there are so many other possibilities as a creative person that one can do, explore, etc. Like I'd never written an opera libretto, and I thought, okay, I'll see what I can do about that. And for me, it's also about, I love collaborating. I did a solo show or two, and I toured, but it's lonely touring a solo show. You must know that.
Yeah.
I'm there with my light guy, And, you pull into town and the sponsor says your hotel is over there. The Tex will meet you at the theater, and you do it. And everyone, if there's anyone there, they applaud. And then you go back to the hotel and hope the bar is open, and it's you and your life guide. There it is. I loved touring to festivals. That's exciting. It's exciting for me to be with other artists.
Oh, that's yes.
Yeah. And that dance, I guess, for me, then, if I'm unique in any way, it is that I continue to migrate across the lines of this and that. And
that's the word. Migration's the key word. Yeah.
Yeah. And I used to think, okay, am I a dilettante because I do this? Do I not have the discipline to be, a full-time driven actor, man? And then I'll share with you this great quote from David Bowie. Oh, I love. And in an interview, he said, he was asked, and he wasn't very old at this point, and he was asked by the interviewer, do you think you have discipline? And he said, well, if you mean, do I get up in the morning at 7 o'clock, put on a shirt and a tie and have my coffee and my this and my that, and I'm out the door by X and to my work? No, I don't. But if you mean, can I see an idea and play with it for a bit and figure out, does this idea have enough value for me to want to invest in it? He said, then I do have discipline, because if I see that idea, I'm going to go there as far as that takes. So for me, a project that, I've been working on this opera now since 2017, and I don't work on it every day. But I am doing something in the same way I did that little mask piece. I did that for a friend who had a festival, and he kind of pushed me to do it. And I'm really glad he did, because it was something creative in a period of really fallowness for so many of us. Mm-hmm. And I'm about to take readings from the libretto and put some of Morris's paintings with them for another 5-minute piece. Where am I going with that?
But I was going to say, what was I going to say? Where am I going? There's something that, I had a great point to make, but related to what you were saying. But
it's a sharpener.
Put it out. No, encourage it.
Oh.
It's rapid fire time.
Oh, it's rapid fire time.
Oh, no.
Rapid fire time.
Okay.
Are you ready, Joan?
Okay, Joan, this is the highlight of the show. I have a list of terms here, words, and I'm going to read them to you one by one, and you're going to give me a quick word association reaction to the word that I pronounce, okay?
Can I talk dirty?
You can do anything you want, and just do it as quickly as you can.
Can I flash you?
Oh, well, that'll be the next section after this.
Aging flesh.
Yeah.
Of a mime.
Oh my God.
All right, go for it.
Okay, go.
Yeah, just a minute. Okay, so
Ready, go.
Ready, here we go. Feet.
Mime.
Arms.
Legs.
Spotlight.
Me.
Hands.
Love them.
Fourth wall.
Where?
Sweat.
Of my brow.
Child.
Of my womb.
Elder.
Me.
Props.
Love them.
Mask.
Love them.
Age.
It is what it is.
Failure.
Possible.
Critic. Teacher.
Us.
Fame.
Missed it.
Language.
Mime. Mime is mimesis. Mime is a representazione de realite. It is everything. Mimological thinking is the most important kind of thinking that one can have.
Future.
Now. Future. No, that was.
Thank you very much.
Bravo.
So that was wonderful. So the listeners and the viewers will get a version of what you just did. So
Okay. I'm sure Jeff Hoyle did that fabulously.
Oh, you were right with him. Jeff, of course, Jeff, and he was having a lot of fun. But you were right there with him.
That was wonderful. It was like we got a little performance by Joan. That was
it was good.
Thanks.
Tell us a little bit more about your creative process. Like, how do you start if you have an idea? Like, you're talking about the idea of having the discipline to focus on an idea and just keep going with it, even if it's over a long period of time. How does it start? Does it start with an idea, a question, or what?
I would say there's no single answer to that question. I used to get mad at my partner, Michael, after he became managing director and say, why are we only going after grant-driven projects? But that is the reality of our world sometimes. Often it's a visual cue. For example, the piece I did on the 3 women caught in a slave labor camp during the Holocaust was based on being at a residency in the Banff Center and going to an artist exhibit of these extraordinary photographs, which were blow-ups of these tiny little things about this big, that were images of domestic life, a pot, a flower, a cup, sewn to pieces of felt. And they were crudely made. It turned out that they had been made from grenade scraps left over from what these women had to do in this camp. And I was so struck by these images, I said to her, may I use these somehow, somewhere? I want to do something with these. And she said, sure. And it took several years, but eventually that piece became what I called Elizabeth's book, this little book that was made in this slave camp in secret by a friend of hers and given as a gift to her. And I would say possibly with Morris Graves, it was learning about the estates he had built over his lifetime. Again, imagery inspired me, and then seeing his paintings and what he had, and then always then after that initial thing is research, or the piece I did about balance in women's lives was because I had actually woven baskets myself, and I knew what it was to have the sticks be too strong to be pulled by the weavers, or the weavers too strong to pull weak sticks, that it goes out of shape. Mm-hmm. And costume is extremely important to me.
Oh, yeah.
I created.
Do you consider a costume like another actor on stage with you? You know what I mean? This relationship or is it just material?
It's something that defines me. Like, I don't know, James, if you ever saw any of the Scar Tissue mysteries. Scar Tissue was a detective character I created after a failed love affair and was feeling cynical. And I thought, who thinks of love as a dead dog on the beach? And I thought of, Humphrey Bogart, Sam Spade, and I created a female character, a female Sam Spade. She was so popular. We did 4 plays with this character, and that was out of an image, black shirt, white tie, suspenders, tuxedo pants, high heels, and a fedora.
That's so interesting, because I found that so many of my characters had to do with a costume that I found, and what you put the costume on and it transforms you, and then it informs you of who that person is. And then all of a sudden there's a lot of creativity and ideas percolating just because of that particular way the dress hung or the way the hat looked.
I am so there with that.
Yeah, I always felt the costume was another actor, another spirit with you, like almost like a Native American thing. There's another collaborator, because
I just never got that deeply into the essence of that, James.
But we all with Olivier, it was the nose. I remember reading about that when I went there. But yes, especially since probably you spent a lot of your acting life wearing black.
A certain amount, especially when I was younger, but not so much now.
Joan, when you're creating work like that, we talked about devised theater, like when you're working with young people, a group of people, you're trying to create something. How does that start? Do you offer them something or do you get something from them?
Oh, well, there's usually a prompt of some kind. Our students go through different processes, like they have a storytelling segment. And sometimes, and it's different, it depends on who the teacher is, but it might say, okay, you have a tabletop and you have objects, and the story has to be performed on this table with these objects. Or you have to find a character that you develop, and that everything you can learn about that character, you make it up. And everything from the gesture to the way they sound. And then you have to place them in a milieu, in their own space. And then we try to give them the technical help to recreate, that lonely room or that boisterous thing. I would say there's tons of ways. There's a wonderful book by a friend named Will Wigler on about playmaking, devised playmaking using issues. And it's really tremendous information about how you go about it. And one of my former students just wrote a book about clowning called Clown, the Physical Performer, I think. His name is Joe Diefenbacher. And he's spent years as a solo performer, working with a group, working on the street. He's an incredible prop builder, and he has a lot about how you devise clown pieces. Mm-hmm. So I would say I'm not someone who says just go into the studio and mess around, but devising does require the willingness to go into the studio. That's one of the things that's hardest to do. It's like for me.
Yeah. I just remember what I was going to ask you because it's related to this. Mm-hmm. So the thing about physical theater is, because you were talking about collaborators going into the studio. The great thing about physical theater is it's like you have an idea and it's like, come on, Joan and Karen, come with me. Come with me. Let's work, follow me. Let's go. Or Karen, you have an idea. I'm with you. There's that idea of this, the migration of energy, but it's really about like, I have this idea. Come with me. Come on. That's what's so great about the world of what Del Arte has created and others, So.
Well, it's especially great working with people. Like when I did my solo show, what I was going to say is that when I write a play, you almost have to chain me to the table leg in order to get me to do it. I'm one of those classic cases of people who have ideas, but when it comes to sit down and actually do it, you'll do anything to avoid that. And I feel like working with another person. When I did my solo show, I hired or had one of my students be my assistant and stage manager. And I would tell her that I was going to meet her at the studio at such and such a time, even though I didn't need her to be there, only so I would go. Otherwise, I would say, I don't feel like going in today. I mean, there is that quality. And I think that goes with what I mean about discipline being the long distance run.
Yeah. It's like Picasso. Picasso couldn't get out of bed very often. His wife at the time would have to nudge him out of bed. It's like.
Well, I read about Twyla Tharp, someone comes to pick her up at 5 o'clock in the morning, her chauffeur and her limousine takes her to her studio where she spends the next little hour. And gee whiz, I wonder she's.
What about legacy? What's your legacy? Do you care about that, or do you nourish that? Do you polish that? What does that mean to you?
Well, I just applied for a big grant. They call a legacy grant.
Did you really?
California, for the first time in years, put out a call for individual artists' applications. And they divided it into 3 age groups, young artists, middle career, and legacy artists. And so I said, 50 grand is worth applying for.
Yeah.
So I did. And I had to think a bit about my legacy. And I guess what I feel like, I've always felt that the work we did as teachers would last much longer and be much more of a legacy than the performing work, because it
Yeah.
is theater after all. It's not film, and it's transient, and it lives and then it's gone. Even if you film it, it's not the same.
But also a good class is a good performance in a way, you know, like I've seen things, I'm sure you have, in classes with students, amazing work that the public will never see.
Yes.
You know, so that there's a mystery, there's a a magical place in the classroom that is performance related, and it's that's so I agree with you. The teaching will far outlive the performance of the day. You know,
and what our students have done all over the world is moving something along. You know, like the Zimbabwe school, or we just had a Sri Lankan student write to us about a way of acting teaching that he wants to do, or the people who have puppet companies or have gone on to be clowns. The interesting thing I would say about Delarte in relation to Lecoq, it's the same. He never meant to train actors in a particular style. So you have directors, you have actors, you have puppeteers, you have clowns, you have acrobats, all who come out of the school able to do better what it is that they want to do. Why we don't teach a technique, in that the idea, and this is a Ronlin idea, I don't think a Carlo idea, but Ronlin expressed it so well, is that you find the techniques you need to do the content you want to do. So if it requires that you become a musician or a dancer in order to present what you want on stage, you do that. But you have the tools to search that out and to, like you were saying about devising, to get that out there, because it's not easy to go from that burst of idea, and then comes the hard part.
Yeah, let's repeat that next week. You know, like once you have the idea, like, oh yeah, here's the test. Now, can I do the same things more or less? You know, but maybe that's not the important thing. Maybe it's a living thing, right?
So what will you do with your $50,000 legacy grant?
That's great. That's fantastic. You got that.
I'm not sure how much of a chance I have in my demographic. I'm an old white woman.
Oh, you haven't been awarded that yet?
No.
Oh, I thought you had been awarded that.
We've already awarded it to you.
Thank God I got that clear. I won't find out about this until September.
So we've given it to you. What are you
Thank you.
What are you going to do with it?
On behalf of Joan Schirle, accepting the award, what will I do with it? Well, it means I could fund the deficit in what funds I've already raised for this opera. And it means I could, I'd probably go to Europe. I'd take a cruise. I don't know. I would finish that project, and I would, I was talking to a friend about this yesterday. Tell me what you think. I grew up with the idea, never use your own money when you produce. And then the friend said, I was taught exactly the opposite. No one will trust you if you don't put your own money into a project. What do you think?
Interesting. I have tended to use my own money because I just, it's like, I have an idea, come with me. And if you can't come with me, I'm going to do it. I've written one grant in my life and I've gotten it, but I got it. But I've always used my own money.
I think in my career, I've done it mostly for free because I didn't get any money. And I found at the times when I was working on getting money, I spent so much energy trying to get the money that I didn't have the energy to be an artist. And I don't want to do that anymore.
That's what turned me off with Hollywood. I did a lot of work in Hollywood. And at the end, it's like, I don't want to work the room, forget working the room.
Exactly. How many elevator pitches do I have to have?
Exactly. Yes.
Yeah.
What's your favorite place that your work has taken you to? You mentioned about you'd like to go to Europe, but do you have a favorite place that you've experienced through your life as a theater actor creator?
I guess I would say festivals. in general, festivals we've gone to in Brazil and Venezuela, etc. That's where you meet people who are doing something great. You see things and they may not be well known outside of their country, or where you find them, or you find that you make friends, like this Brazilian company Lume that we met so many years ago. And the atmosphere to me of a festival is like having, mega dose of vitamins.
Yeah.
Being able to talk to other people, kind of like what we're doing here, talking about your work, but also the atmosphere that, okay, you're going to go see this show tonight, and then there's a late show, and then tomorrow there's 3 more, and then this company's doing, and
it really it feeds your creative soul to be around so much work, and also to be around people who understand what you've gone through in order to create your own work.
Throw a name out there. One festival you've been to, like, give us an actual geographic location that.
Well, the Curitiba Festival in Brazil, the Noorderzaan Festival in Holland. And on my solo show, I went to a wonderful festival in Spain called the Reus, R-E-U-S Festival. I'll tell you this. We got to the height of the first festival we ever did was the best we would ever get to. We didn't know that. That was the Venice Biennale.
Wow.
Yeah.
And it was all downhill from there.
What about advice for young artists? Like all this talk we've been putting in for the last hour or so. Like what do we pass on? What do you pass on to the young artist, given all these thoughts and ruminations?
Well, some of them, unfortunately, due to the widespread nature of advice on the internet now, and that the corporate world has taken over all of our good slogans.
Yeah.
Do the work is one, because if you don't do the work, I dabbled in, I took a course in creativity coaching from a guy named Eric Maisel, because I was trying to help myself. I was trying to figure out, why can't I write this play? So I took a course in creativity coaching, and he's very practical. He says you can have all the good ideas you want, but if you're not willing to market your work, and that doesn't mean you don't perform for free, but unless you're willing to put it out there and find a place where you can do it. And he said, then it's just dreams.
Yeah, all the basement artists that in the world that never come to the surface.
But on the other hand, not everybody is designed to have what I'll call a professional life.
Yeah.
And the idea that has come to me slowly, this is part of my evolution at Delarte, because initially for me, it was all about the international touring, the going places, I love that. But when all that dried up, we had to focus on our community. And not suddenly, over a long period of time, we've changed our community. And that's because as artists, we have been responsible to the city where we live, the region where we are. And even Blue Lake has become a place where people move to because we are there. So the whole idea of community engagement, it's not like I pioneered anything. That was going on long before we said this is major, and it's now become a major part of our curriculum. How does an artist interface with their community? What do you owe your community? What can you expect from them? And at the beginning of the pandemic, someone said something very smart. Some company that was going under, someone said, if you take care of your community, they will take care of you. Because this other company was being supported, the donations were coming in. They were saying, we don't want you to go away. And we've experienced that a little bit. People saying, we don't want you to go away. And it's like family in a way. So I would tell young artists, number one, do the work. Number two, don't feel it has to be done somewhere of note. And I learned this from the Balinese. We didn't even talk about that. I've made 20 trips to Bali to take people there to study Balinese traditional performing arts. And what I got from those experiences and working with those people is they don't distinguish the level of virtuosity that you give at a high temple ceremony, or what you do at your cousin's tooth filing, which is their coming of age ceremony, or the baby's 6-month ceremony. It is, you're giving your all the time. I believe in that. So I incur, and Jeff Hoyle said this, I don't know if he said this in his interview, but he said virtuosity is the greatest freedom. You will have more independence if you're really good at what you do than you will if you're kind of. So even if you plan to work only with homeless people, or with trying to join the social justice movement that's happening now, and pick something that you're going to commit your energy and your action to, be really good at what you do. It will help people take you more seriously. It will give you more opportunities, and it will help people think better of artists.
Yes.
You know, we're gonna have you back, because you're such a fountain of wisdom. So I'm gonna ask you the last question right now.
Okay,
because this has been a wonderful interview, and we can certainly do another one at some point, because there's so much more to talk about. But what do you want to be when you grow up?
Oh, wow. You know, sometimes I look at someone like Helen Mirren and I say, damn, she has my career. I would have enjoyed film work, actually. I don't regret what I have done at all, but I would like to do that.
I don't think film. I think you're too wild for film. I don't think film could contain you. Film has a way of containing people, and I don't think you would fit there. In my experience, I think you've had a wonderful career up to this point.
Get out of the box there.
Yeah,
Joan, it's been so wonderful listening to all your stories, and very inspirational about the things that you said and all the things that you've done. And
Thanks.
One of the things that we're trying to do with this podcast is to sort of make a record of all the people that have contributed to the art of mime and physical theater. And you've contributed a lot of information here that I know many, many people will be interested in hearing about.
Thank you for listening to the Mime Radio Show. Join us in 2 weeks for a conversation with the Adapters.